Heaver. We're going to have a look at Time magazine now, because this has a really interesting image on the front. Well, a changing image, which is quite startling, really, isn't it?
It's a bit freakish.
It's a bit freaky.
It's very clever. So we see Trump transitioning into Putin and back again. And I assume the static cover is this. So it's a blend of the two faces. And gosh, it makes a really simple point, but so effectively, doesn't it? In the week that we've seen Putin and Trump cozying up as pals, and Trump one moment appearing to take the side of the Russian president as opposed to his own intelligence services, and then 24 hours later saying, that would, I said in the press conference, was actually a wouldn't.
And tonight, it's been confirmed that he's invited, Donald Trump's invited President Putin to the White House in the autumn.
I mean, amazing, isn't it? When Trump was running, everyone was saying he was going to be isolationist and not engage with the world, and actually he's reshaping the world. Obviously, he came here, he's talked about a trade deal, he's solving North Korea, he's meeting Vladimir Putin. You know, it's quite the opposite to what we were told. Here's a man I think that's changing whether you talk about things like the UN or NATO, changing things in a really dramatic way for the better.
So you think the way he's engaging with Putin, taking his side over the US intelligence services, is changing the world for the better?
Do you agree that North Korea is unbelievable? Because I think if Obama had had it, I mean, he obviously got the Nobel Peace Prize. Is Trump going to get the Nobel Peace Prize?
I think Trump gave King, I can't even say his name now. I think Trump gave the Korean president a huge sort of triumph, and it was a huge own goal for America.
The latest talks were not successful.
No,
but here is a man who's solving this.
Absolutely shocking that you think that he's changing the world for the better.
Absolutely, and the American people agree with me, of course, because he's going to get re-elected. And the thing is, look, people that hate Trump,
ratings are really not very well.
Well, they were before the election, then he won it.
They did.
The interesting thing is that people that hate Trump will not give him credit for anything, right? They said he'd be isolationist, then he's not. He's actually the opposite. He actually shapes the world and changes the...
People gave him credit for the North Korea summit, didn't they? I mean, people were talking about the Nobel Peace Prize if he can pull it off.
I don't have a nice word to say about a man who separates toddlers from their... Yeah, because
well, Obama had deported a lot of people as well, but no one kicked up a fuss then.
People did kick up a very big fuss, actually, Michael, and Trump has taken it to a whole other level. But I think it's absolutely extraordinary that Michael is sitting here saying that that Trump is shaping the world for the better.
Absolutely, front of the queue instead of back of the queue.
He's sucking up to the Russian president and questioning the intelligence of the US, his own intelligence
putting us front of the queue. Obama wouldn't us back of the queue.
He absolutely is not putting us at the front of the queue. There's absolutely no way that the US are going to strike a trade deal with the UK that is preferential to UK. What's going to happen is we're going to see the UK market flooded with things like chlorinated chicken.
Such pessimism for global trade, independent trade policy. Great days ahead of Brexit.
Dan Coates, Director of National Intelligence, was told on stage about this White House summit with President Putin. He described it as that'll be special, which I think is probably the understatement, isn't it? But let's move on now to the Mirror. And we've got Boris. Exclusive Bojo scandal, the Mirror says. So Boris is still living in his official residence despite his resignation.
Yeah, but apparently we've heard that it's been clarified there's no additional cost to the taxpayer. And actually, the more interesting aspect to me of this story is obviously Boris resigned. He gave this speech in Parliament criticising Theresa May's Brexit policy. I think people at the Daily Mirror are a little bit worried that Boris Johnson could be the next leader, next Prime Minister. I think they've got big problems on their hands, the left in this country, if Boris Johnson does become, oust Theresa May and becomes the next Prime Minister, because I think he'll have Labour on the run big time.
I think it's more than the left that will have problems on its hands if Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. I mean, gosh, the guy can't...
London Mayor twice, elected London Mayor twice.
As Foreign Secretary, I mean, I think he's genuinely been one of the most terrible Foreign Secretaries that this country's ever seen. I mean, I do agree with Michael, though, that in terms of this story, I was really shocked when I read the headline and actually felt really angry to think that he was still living in a grace and favour apartment. But actually, I think the quote from the government suggests that it's not at cost to the taxpayer. So, maybe he will take a month to move out of the place where he's lived.
I mean, you can't just turf someone out on the street, can you?
Well,
because he's renting out his own home, admittedly for pocketing tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah. I think if it's not at cost to the taxpayer, this does take some of the heat out of these headlines that we've seen. But I do think Boris has got a lot to answer for in the way that he sort of conducted himself during the Leave campaign, the way that he's been the Foreign Secretary over the last few months. I think he campaigned vociferously policy to leave. He's never come up with a sort of positive plan for what Britain leaving the EU would look like. He's always just said to Theresa May, you know, don't like your plan.
Well,
and
I mean, you said to Theresa May yesterday, it's not too late. You can still do this.
Absolutely,
yeah,
and I think at the moment, well, there's an alternative.
He doesn't know.
Well, the David Davis Brexit department, I think they're now pushing their alternative plan. It's going to be very interesting. I don't think Theresa May's Chequers plan is going to last. I think Boris Johnson gave a superb speech. He absolutely took it apart. He stood up for Brexiteers. And as I say, I think Daily Mirror and Labour supporters should be worried, because I think they constantly do down Boris. And you've got to remember, Conservative elected twice as the London mayor. That's quite an achievement. And I think he'd demolish Corbyn.
OK, lots to talk about tonight. We'll have more papers coming up at 11 o'clock. Michael, Sonia, for now, thanks very much indeed. But coming up in the next hour here on Sky News, a public health emergency, a warning as violence